How many were at Messy Church this past month? Don't raise your hands. I don't want to center anybody else. But now that you did, good. One of the nicest meals they had, because I like macaroni and cheese. And Judy's not with us today. She's home recuperating, but she did want me to express her sincere appreciations to those that brought some of the wonderful macaroni and cheese and all the other items that we had for lunch for Messy Church as well. It doesn't go unappreciated. So we hope if you didn't make it to that Messy Church, you'll make it to the next Messy Church, which is themed upon the Nativity. Go figure. Well, what have we found out about God? What is God like? We've learned that God is holy. We've learned that God is just. We've learned that God is faithful. We've learned that God is omnipotent, all-powerful. We've learned that God is omniscient, all-knowing. And as we have been singing this morning, we know that God is omnipresent. God is everywhere. There are three attributes that should always be kept together in your mind: the omnipresence, the omniscience, and the omnipotence of God. They all begin with that letter omni. They are in threes in triplicate, meaning that they are important for us to remember and not to forget. And that word omni just simply means that, all. God is all-encompassing in all aspects of who He is and what He does. This morning, God's omnipresence is one of the most difficult doctrines, I believe, of the entire Bible. The question, where is God, has always been out there. And we struggle time and time again wondering about where it is out there that God is. We've heard that some say that God is a nebulous. God, He's out there. He's kind of like that black hole, something that's beyond our reach. Bette Midler sang about it from a distance. God is watching us. And we think sometimes in the course of life and what we have to encounter that God definitely is just that, distant, that He's not present with us. And it's a very important question. Where is God? Because the seeker wants to know, as does the skeptic, as does the guilty person, guilt because of the sins in their lives, who want to run the other way but realize that no matter where they run, God is there. So does the hurting person, the one who feels abandoned by Almighty God. Where is God when I need Him? The reason this one is so hard for us is that we have nothing to compare it with, do we? We can only be in one place at one time. Now, Christmas is upon us, and Robin and I and a few others probably are going to feel like we're stretched all over the place, and yet we're not, because we can only be in one place at one time. We can only be in at one kettle position for a period and then scurry off to the next one, whatever. It's hard because we have nothing to compare it with. We can only place ourselves in one spot at one time. Only God is everywhere present. Listen to how the psalmist shares it. Psalm 139. We looked at it last week. We look at it again today. Verse 7. I can never escape from your spirit. I can never get away from your presence. If I go to the heavens, you are there. If I go to the place of the dead, you are there. If I ride the wings of the morning, if I dwell by the farthest oceans, even there your hand will guide me, your strength will support me. I could ask the darkness to hide me and the light around me to become night, but even in the darkness I cannot hide from you. To you the night shines as bright as day. Darkness and light are both alike to you. Here's a simple definition of omnipresence. The Lord our God is everywhere at once. He is everywhere present all the time. Paul Little states that God is not a substance spread out in a thin layer all over the earth. All of him is in London, England. All of him is in Luxembourg and in Lindsay, Ontario, at once and the same time. Psalm 139 is a rich, deep, and very personable song that declares God's creation in the womb. It definitively establishes God's omnipresence and his omniscience. For our purposes this morning, I want us to park in those verses that I just read, verses 7 to 12. David asks two questions in those verses. Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? They sound a bit rhetorical, don't they? Yet they are an emphatic way of declaring that God's presence is everywhere. While David may have wanted to run from God at different points in his life, he understood there is no place, absolutely no place he could go to get away from the presence of God Almighty. Since God is spirit, it is impossible to get away from him. Verses 8 and 9, God is present in the upper regions of the world and in the depths of the earth. After checking out the heights and the depths, David decides to travel from east, the rising sun, to the west, to the setting sun. October's Messy Church, we talked about the prophet Jonah. Jonah, we were to find out, knew exactly about the omnipresence of God, didn't he? Jonah found out the hard way. He was commissioned by God to go and preach against this great city of Nineveh. He was to tell them how wicked they were. Jonah didn't like his assignment. Ever been there? Didn't like the assignment that God was giving him. Not because he wasn't in favor of telling the Ninevites where to go, but because he knew that this omnipresent God, this omniscient God, this all-powerful God was going to do things his way because he had a plan and a purpose for Nineveh. And Jonah, knowing the plan of God, said, well, I'm not really wholeheartedly into this, Lord, because you're only going to end up showing mercy and kindness and grace to these people. These people were the mortal enemies of Israel. And Jonah wanted no part of God's redemptive plan for these barbarians. So what does he do? He tries to flee from God. Jonah 1 verse 3 says that he was running away from the Lord in the other directions. Have you ever run away from God? In moments when God has spoken to your hearts and saying, I really would appreciate it if you could do this for me, this particular thing. And you say, well, I hear you, Lord, but my heart's really not in it. Or I was thinking of something a little more, stand-out-ish. Besides, you're only going to do what you want to do anyway, so what is the purpose of it, right? No. Jonah found out there was no place that he could go. David, like Jonah, investigated the heights and the depths, the east and the west, the land and the sea, and he could not find a place where God wasn't. Wherever Jonah went, God's hand was there to guide him. His right hand was holding him fast. Wherever David was, he found the same thing at play. And you and I know within our own Christian walk that is so with us. There is nowhere we could go where the all-seeing eye of God isn't present. And that should cause us to reflect. That should cause us to ponder. For the moral of Jonah's story is this: it's foolish to run from God because there's no place to hide. In Psalm 139, verse 11, we see that David started to wonder if there was a difference in day and night. If I say, surely the darkness will hide me and the light become night around me, David played around with the idea that if he just did some stuff in the dark, then he would at last be out of reach of God's presence. When I was looking at that particular verse, I reflected back to Charlie Pride days. Everybody know who Charlie Pride was? Yeah, come on. You know what song popped into my head? Chandeliers. No, Crystal Chandeliers. That's pretty good though. Pardon? Behind closed doors. Behind? Oh, very good. Well, I never thought of that one really. No, I thought about snakes crawl at night. That's what they say. The darkness hides a lot of things, so we think. And so we think that sometimes the things done in darkness aren't going to be seen, but God, we are told, there is no place, no thing which goes unnoticed by the all-seeing eye of God. David played around with that idea, and then he would at last be out of reach of God's presence, so he thought. Likewise, we think that we're hiding things from God just because it's dark. Or we think we're doing something in secret. But God sees everything because he is everywhere present, all at the same time. Verse 12 helps us to understand more about God's pervasive presence. The darkness will not be dark to you. The night will shine like the day, for the darkness is as light to you. The curtains of the evening will no more cover us than the wings of the morning will allow us to escape his presence. Everything we do, whether we think we can be seen or not, is done in the full presence of a holy, majestic, and ever-present God. That led me to three particular points I want to emphasize this morning as we look at these particular verses of Scripture. The first point is the conceptions of God's omnipresence. There are several important concepts of God's omnipresence that are outlined in those particular verses. First, God cannot be contained. Solomon understood this when he said in 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 27, "But will God really dwell on earth? The heavens, even the highest heavens, cannot contain him. How much less this temple that I have built?" Well, I understand what people mean when they say they are going to God's house when they come to church. It's not entirely accurate, is it? God does not live in a house made by human hands. It can certainly be argued that the temple was a holy place, but today we are the temple. We the people, his people. He dwells within. Wherever they are, wherever they go, God is present. God is with them. Secondly, God cannot be localized. God's no less in one portion of the universe than any other portion. And he is no more present anywhere than where you are right now. In other words, anyone, anywhere in this vast universe that we call home, God is present. He is the Lord. The Lord is in this place. Wherever you are, God is right there, right now. Thirdly, God is always present, whether we believe it or not. In the early days of space travel, one of the Russian cosmonauts returned from orbiting the Earth, and had announced that when he had looked out of his space capsule, he had not seen God anywhere. To which someone replied, if he had taken off his spacesuit for just 1 second, he would have seen God pretty quickly. Okay? God is always present. Fourth, he is always available. This is the good one. He's available to us wherever we go. 24 hours a day. That phrase, 24/7, we used to thought it applied to the Salvation Army officer or any other clergy. Come on, right? But really, it originated with God. He is on task every hour of every day, and he's already where we are going. Friends, whatever God is calling, wherever God is calling, whatever he is asking you to do, remember this, he is always ready. He is already there before you even get there. And he will be with you even before you arrive. Now, isn't that beautiful? He will be with you even before you arrive. Now, that's pretty fast. That's the conceptions of God's omnipresence. Then there's the conviction. Point 2. The truth of God's omnipresence can be soothing or unsettling, can't it? To some of you, it brings comfort. For others, perhaps, you find it very convicting. The fact that God is everywhere present at the same time can be a disturbing doctrine, can't it? Are you trying to run from God like Jonah? Is God calling you to do something right now that you want nothing to do with? Don't wait until God sends a storm into your life or you end up with a whale of a problem. Stop running right now. Do what he is calling you to do. Hebrews chapter 4, verse 13 says, nothing in all creation is hidden from God's sight. Everything is uncovered and laid bare before the eyes of him to whom we must give an account. In Winnipeg, when we were stationed there, our son Chris, he must have been what? What was he, dear? 11? Younger? He was in public school, right? Younger. Anyways, this isn't like anyone that's 11, 9, 12, about to be teenagers, our teenagers. This is for you. Our son Chris was asked to do something he didn't want to do. Go figure. And as he was going downstairs, Robin says, don't be mumbling under your breath or making faces at me neither. And he quickly turned around, shot up those stairs, his jaw dropped, and he looks at his mom and he says, how did you know? She's like God. She was present. She was all-knowing. We just know. You have that sense as a parent, don't you? Well, Chris was completely thrown back. And, caught him broadside. Are you doing something in secret? Maybe you think that no one else sees, knows, or will find out. Perhaps you've arranged everything so that you can get away with things. Maybe you're involved in an inappropriate relationship or some kind of illicit behavior. Folks, let me be honest with you. There is no way you can avoid the presence of God. Been there. There is no way, absolutely no way, we can avoid the presence of God. He sees what you're doing because he's with you no matter what you think you're getting away with. Jeremiah 23 verse 24 says this, can anyone hide in secret places so that I cannot see him? Do I not fill heaven and earth, declares the Lord? That tells me it's foolish. It's foolish to try to hide from God. Now, I come from a family of jokesters. I know that's a surprise to you all. But as a young teen, I was really into comics, not the superhero comics, sorry. Not the Thors or the Supermans or Captain America or whatever they were at that time. I was into the ghost stories. And yeah, I know, shameful, shameful. But I was, and this one night, my sister and I, that's my twin sister, we were sitting up in our bedrooms on our bed, and we were reading comics, and I had my pillow against the wall, and I'm sitting there, and of course, like always, when I'm doing comics, she looks over at me and she says, "Jerry, I just saw your pillow move." And I said, "Dina, you have to stop this, especially at the scary part of the story." And we go on. We're sitting there. She goes, "Jerry, I saw it move again." So at that particular point, I'm getting a little tired, and I say to Dean, "Okay, if you don't stop this, you're out of here." So then I get back to reading my comic, and the next thing I know, I felt the tug of the pillow. And so I'm zoomed up off that bed, and I'm at the top of the stairways hollering down, "Mom, Mom, you got to come up here." And by the time Mom got up here, we were crouched over the bed, looking under, me in the front, Dina behind me. And it was complete darkness. It's always complete darkness until you get to the edge, right? And we're there watching intently, and all of a sudden, out jumps my brother and goes, "Whoa!" I fell over backwards, hit my head, started bawling my eyes out, and it took me the rest of the night to get back to sleep. Do you know what? That was so damaging that I was 18 years old. 18 years old, and they had to go into the house and turn all the lights on before I would go into the house. That's how bad my brother scared me. What a good man. What a good man. Yeah, so that's being a jokester, or a family of jokesters. Well, what's that got to do with the omnipresence of God? This, even in a situation like that, God, I know, is not hiding under a bed, hoping to scare us. In fact, his presence is meant to be a comfort for us. Just as David couldn't flee from him, neither can we. If you sense his conviction this morning, respond to him. Do you feel like a fugitive, trying to flee from the living God, the ever-present God? The reason he convicts is so that he can get our attention. Why? Because he loves us too much to let us keep hiding or running from him. That's the conviction of omnipresence. What about the third point? The comfort. God's presence also brings comfort. Isaiah 41 verse 10 says, "So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, help you. I will uphold you in my righteous right hand." Friends, because God is always with us, we don't have to be dismayed. We don't have to be afraid. We don't have to be discouraged. The practical doctrine brings us comfort in at least 3 ways. It tells me this: God is always near. What a blessed assurance is that. What a reassurance is that for us, his people. If you don't have the second half of Hebrews 13, verse 5 memorized, you really need to do it. Here's what it says: "Never will I leave you, never will I forsake you." Secondly, God is especially close during tough times. During tough times. Psalm 34 verse 18 said, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted, and he saves those who are crushed in spirit." Thirdly, God comes even closer. He's close, but he comes even closer. Because James tells us in chapter 4, verse 8, "Come near to God, and what? He will come near to you." There is a place of quiet rest. It's near to the heart of God. Our version of Samuel Logan Bringle, and if you know your Army history, Samuel Logan Bringle was a commissioner, and he started out in the training college having to polish the shoes of all the other cadets in the training college because he was a man who came from very astute status in society. And I guess the powers to be at training college staff thought that, well, we really need to humble this man so that pride doesn't get in the way of his commitment to be a Salvation Army officer. And so his job was to polish the shoes of every other cadet. And he did it. He did it. Who is he like? He's our version of Brother Lawrence, who wrote a fascinating book many years ago called Practicing the Presence of God. For 15 years, his responsibility was to wash the greasy pots and pans in the monastery, a job he disliked. Practicing the presence of God transformed what he considered a chore into an exciting privilege. This is what he writes. Listen. My day-to-day life consists of giving God my simple, loving attention. If I'm distracted, he calls me back in tones that are supernaturally beautiful. The most holy and necessary practice in our spiritual life is the presence of God. That means finding constant pleasure in his divine company, speaking humbly and lovingly with him in all seasons, at every moment, without limiting the conversation in any way. Isn't that beautiful? Someone else has said that God's presence is like the air we breathe. Air is odorless, tasteless, invisible. We don't think about the air we breathe, yet we depend upon it for our very existence, don't we? Likewise, God's presence is all around us. And if it were withdrawn, none of us could survive for even a moment. Friends, allow his presence to motivate you to be sold out in your service and your worship of him. Do you want to be where God is today? In a sense, you are, because he is here with you. Are you ready to dwell in his presence? Worship team is going to come back and they're going to lead us in this chorus, beautiful chorus, Refiner's Fire. Purify my heart. Let me be as gold and precious silver. Purify my heart. Let me be as gold, pure gold. Refiner's fire. My heart's one desire is to be holy, set apart for you, Master, ready to do your will. Refiner's fire. God is everywhere we are. He sees all. He knows all. And he is powerful enough to take our wandering lives, to take our slothful sinning, and to wipe it clean. But he can only do it if we are willing to surrender it to him. My friends, this place of prayer is here for you to experience this morning the refining fires of a holy God, a just God, a faithful God, an all-knowing, all-present, all-powerful God. He wants to meet with you. Draw close to him. He will draw close to you. And we're going to allow you to draw close to him this morning as we sing these words together.